Hello again. Welcome back. I'm Kristen Murphy, Director of the Developmental Disabilities Council, and this is the final goal area in our presentation for the performance year 1 and 2 of the DD Council's next 5-year state plan. This goal area is systems change, really the heart of what councils do. This is our advocacy work to ensure that the delivery of services is done through systems that are designed to be aligned to the values of the DD Act. In other words, they support the self-determination of individuals with disabilities, they support independence, they promote community inclusion, and they also promote productivity, which seems to be an awkward word for employment. That's the word the DD Act uses. So without any delay, I will turn to the slides. For those of you that are following, this will be slides, slides 42 through 56. Systems change. There are 4 objectives in this important goal area. The first objective has to do with raising awareness. Part of changing systems is to change attitudes among the public at large. This objective reads, the council will conduct outreach and public awareness campaigns that change the perception about the abilities and contributions of people with developmental disabilities. We're going to engage in a number of activities here, the first of which is actually to conduct a survey that will allow us to set a baseline about what the public's perception of people with disabilities in fact is. So in collaboration with the Center for Disability and Community Inclusion at the University of Vermont, one of our network partners, we'll identify 1 to 5 questions that will be added to UVM's Rural Studies annual survey. And through that Rural Studies survey, we'll collect data annually over 5 years about public perceptions of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, including perceptions around employment. It's not written in there, but that is the intent. The outcome of this will be a baseline is established against which the council can measure changes in Vermonters' attitudes about people with disabilities. We are also then going to take up an existing project, our Story Portraits project. Story portraits are 1-page, highly visual presentations of a person or a program with a short paragraph explaining or telling a story about that individual or about the program that we're trying to share with people. They're very powerful. Chelsea does a beautiful job creating these, and we'd like to continue that project. We're going to add 5 story portraits per year at a minimum, and we're going to host an art show in as soon as the State House becomes open again. I don't know if that's really going to happen in year 1, or maybe it has to be delayed till year 2. But we're going to develop an art show where we're able to show these story portraits. And we might also kind of create an opening for that art show, if you will, and double that up with also a previously very successful project, which was our storytelling evening, where family members and self-advocates come and share stories that that have already been kind of reviewed by an editorial board, if you will, or a few people, and have been coached so that they can do an excellent job in presenting those stories. So the outcome of that project, the Story Portrait Project, will be that legislators in the State House and others see and hear compelling images and stories of fellow Vermonters with developmental disabilities. And then we will turn to some additional objectives. We will continue the theme of storytelling, and the council will host at least 1 storytelling evening each year where self-advocates and family caregivers submit stories. In the past, we've made it a contest where the prize is the opportunity to share their story at a public event. Individuals and family members are empowered to share stories, and the council has 8 to 10 new stories a year. That is got a typo in it. Okay, some other awareness activities down here. Through the self-advocacy grant, remember we always have a grant that goes to supporting self-advocacy. Self-advocates speak to at least 3 professional or paraprofessional groups per year. That is something that we have supported in the past and will continue to do. We support GMSA in their work speaking to medical students, people training to be special educators, people entering the field of speech language pathology or occupational therapy, or any of a number of other sort of pre-professional groups. The outcome of that will be that professionals and or paraprofessional groups learn about disability rights and self-advocacy early in their career. And then we will also begin storyboarding and collecting articles for a new edition of Hello Neighbor. You see our past issue there up in the right-hand corner, that very good-looking gentleman, the son of a council member. And that will be published in year 3, but we will begin mapping it out in year 2. The result being that the council is prepared to publish a second installment of Hello Neighbor. So this was a very concrete, clear objective, and you will see that it results in a number of things that we create. A quantitative data set that measures changes over time in perceptions of and attitudes about people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. That's the data set that we're going to work on with the Center for Rural Studies. We have at least 10 new story portraits, 5 a year over 2 years. We have qualitative data, that is anecdotal data illustrating people's responses to the art show, to the story portraits. That'll be a different way of showing how people's perceptions are impacted by something we've done. We'll have press releases and media coverage related to the art show and a story event. And at least 250 people per year have received training about disability rights and self-advocacy through that piece of the self-advocacy grant. So I moved pretty quickly through that one because and I will do so also with the next one because the next 2 at the very end are quite substantial and will take some time. All right, objective 4.2, ongoing policy advocacy. This objective is here because I don't have a crystal ball and I do not know every important public policy issue that's going to rise up through the legislature or the executive branch over the next 2 years. So if need be, we have a place to hang some additional work around policy. So what I've outlined here is a process, the processes we use in order to stay on top of these issues. And if indeed something important pops up through this monitoring and legislative platform process, then we will add to our work plan to describe in more detail what we're going to do going forward. Remember, work plans are living documents and we can change and add to them over time. Objective 2 says that the council will monitor state and federal legislation and policy, educating decision makers and building strategic partnerships as needed. Working through its policy committee, the council will be able to address issues that were not foreseen or that have grown to be a priority. Excuse me, I was losing my voice a little bit. All right, this objective has 3 sections: our annual legislative platform, the work we do on national issues, and monitoring the executive branch. In other words, the agency side of government here in Vermont. Under legislative platform, we will work with our policy committee to identify and vet, meaning test out, potential platform items. Full council vote will be taken in December, and that's when we adopt our legislative platform. That platform can grow and evolve over the course of the legislative session, but we generally like to have at least a good start on it in January or by January when the legislature comes back into session. And we will meet with legislators, testify, and support people to testify. More important, the legislature would much rather hear from members of the public who have lived experience than they want to hear from myself or anyone on our staff. So we support people to testify as needed. And the result will be that the council prioritizes its legislative advocacy. There are always many, many bills of interest, and we can't, with our limited staff, monitor all of them closely, but we do have a process that lets us hone in on the very most important ones. In terms of national issues, we make an annual visit to the offices of each of our member of our congressional delegation. We do that at least once a year with our members. And staff are very actively involved in attending the National Association of Councils on Developmental Disabilities and their policy-related national calls. That is the principal way that we stay on top of what is moving through Congress or the federal bureaucracy that may have an impact on us here in Vermont. The outcome is that the council responds to congressional action and executive orders as needed. And then finally, in terms of monitoring the executive branch here in the state of Vermont, the governor's office on down to the Agency of Human Services, Education, Transportation, and really all the other government agencies, we will monitor and continue to monitor 7 to 10 committees and provide public comment as needed. And the outcome is that the council monitors and responds to actions by Vermont government agencies. For these efforts, the following will be created: an annual legislative platform, which is shared with Vermont legislators, relationships with key legislators, testimony by staff, council members, and others with lived experience, relationships with staff in the Office of the Vermont Congressional Delegation, public comment on national disability issues, public comment on disability issues at the state level. That is actually a substantial bundle of work. Remember, there were 7 to 10 committees that our staff of 3 people monitor every month, pretty much. So that is a lot of meetings. And it is not unusual for us to have we probably submit 10 to 12 substantial documents that are contributions to public comment on any given year. All right, now this is our monster objective. This one is very big. This is our advocacy around systems of care. Notice that that's plural because people with developmental disabilities rely on more than one system. And not all people in Vermont with developmental disabilities are served through the Developmental Disability Service Division and its agencies. Some are served by other programs like the Brain Injury Program or the Choices for Care program. Or they're not receiving, the vast majority are not receiving home and community-based supports, but they do rely on systems in healthcare, systems in elementary through high school and transition education, the vocational rehabilitation system, and economic services systems, which are things like food stamps and heat assistance. All right, so let's read the objective first. The council will advocate that Vermont adequately fund home and community-based services. Vermont will have stable, strong, and equitable service delivery systems that protect the right to person-centered planning, emphasize prevention over crisis care, and provide individualized, flexible supports rather than adhering to rigid service categories. That is a lot. That is a very broad and ambitious objective. First cluster of activities have to do with funding home and community-based services. We will educate lawmakers about the need for adequate base funding and regular cost of living adjustments. That's what a COLA is, cost of living adjustments for the Developmental Disability Services Division. And I would add other HCBS systems like Choices for Care. The outcome will be that all necessary HCBS, all necessary home and community-based services are covered at a fair and sustainable rate for the Vermont Medicaid program. Then we will move to payment design. We will advocate that individuals and their family caregivers have adequate individualized budgets that they can easily track and manage. And we will work with members to outline a position regarding paying parents for the provision of home and community-based services. You may know that we supported a temporary measure to pay parents during the pandemic, because often it was only parents were the only folks that could be safely around children during the height of the pandemic. But a question has arisen, should that flexibility continue? And it's a controversial topic. I don't actually know where our members will land on that one, but we will undertake a process to weigh in on that important issue. So in payment design, the outcome will be that individuals and families have adequate resources and control over their service budgets. That's a very broad statement meant to cover both the desire for easily understood individualized budgets and this question around whether parents should be paid. Then in the area of eligibility, we're going to advocate that the state add additional funding priorities to its system of care plan for the Developmental Disability Services system of care. So you may recall that for clinically eligible individuals, they are then need to pass through a sort of second door in order to receive home and community-based supports, and that is that they need to meet a funding priority. And virtually all of those funding priorities are to a large degree crisis-driven. You're at risk for homelessness, you're a safety risk to yourself or others. Probably the least crisis-driven is that you're at risk of losing a job and you're of a certain age. There are many other important priorities that should be considered that are more prevention-oriented. For example, you might experience regression. That seems like we should prevent regression, because then we are preventing people from getting frustrated and at the loss of skill, particularly around the loss of communication skill. We want to try to be more proactive in supporting people, so we have to set more proactive priorities. We are also going to monitor Vermont's transition to using something called the Supports Intensity Scale Adult Version, or SIS-A, to assess the needs of home and community-based service beneficiaries. I say monitor because the rollout has been rocky. In general, the Supports Intensity Scale it's a tool. It could be used well or poorly. And the implementation of a switch to using it has been a bit rocky. So we will be monitoring that to make sure that it's done properly and well. The result of our advocacy around eligibility will be the outcome that Vermont's funding priorities for developmental disability services are oriented toward prevention rather than crisis intervention. That would be a tall order to have it completely reoriented, but we want to move in that direction. Fourth area of activity will be advocating around the services that are covered under the heading of home and community-based services. We will advocate for new housing models. You've already heard that activity in Objective 2.2 when we talked about housing. And again, remember, a good plan covers multiple objectives. Activities can cover more than one objective. Sorry about that. So we will also advocate for crisis prevention and wellness support. And we will advocate, third, that we align home and community-based services across programs. What did I just say? What did that mean? Let me explain. Right now, there's a menu in Choices for Care. Here are some services you can have. There's a menu in brain injury. Here are some services. There's a menu in developmental services. Here are some services. The menus are not the same. I think, and the council believes, that these should be the same menu, regardless of which door you went into the home and community-based services system. They call it a no wrong door policy, right? Regardless of which program you came through, you really should be able to pick and choose from a common list of possible services. So people in developmental disability services should be able, if they need it, to ask for help with homemaking, basic, housekeeping type chores. That's something that you can ask for in Choices for Care. Conversely, if you're in Choices for Care, you should be able to ask for supported employment if that's a service you need. And you can do that in developmental services, but you can't in Choices for Care. So we're really looking for a time when there's a common menu and the services all line up, and it doesn't really matter which door you came through in terms of your eligibility. The result of this bundle of advocacy around services that are covered will be all eligible individuals have access to the same robust menu of supports and services. So by robust, we mean it includes wellness support and it includes housing. And we are talking about the same menu across programs. Third page about the system of care. All right, so in the area of service delivery, the council will continue its very strong advocacy that Vermont comply with the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services requirements regarding conflicts of interest in case management. I should say case management. Expect that. All right, so we have been advocating since it first came online in 2014 that the state comply with the conflict of interest free requirement for case management services. It's now over 7 years that the state has not been aligned with that rule. And there's a long history to why that is, but we will continue to vigorously advocate that case management be decoupled, taken apart from the delivery of services so that people who want to have an independent case manager can. The outcome of that will be that the home and community-based service beneficiaries have access to independent assessment, care planning, and case management services, as well as options counseling and an ombudsman for DDSD, for developmental services. So that is a very truncated, tightly packed statement. Unfortunately, I don't have enough time to kind of go over all of these things, but we have been advocating all along that the system of care for developmental services needs some better checks and balances. And that's what we're talking about here. There needs to be some independence in how people are assessed and how they're getting their case management. And then there also need to be checks like an ombuds office where you can go if you are seeking to have a complaint or concern resolved that you're having with your service delivery agency. And you should be able to get independent, unbiased information about what all your options are. Some of that will be the website that we've been talking about building under some of our other objectives. But some of that also needs to be something called options counseling, which is a service that people in the independent living space, people with physical disabilities, get a lot of options counseling, but is less independently delivered in developmental services. Mostly it's done by the agency that will ultimately be delivering your services. So again, there's a kind of conflict of interest or inherent bias in the information that you might be getting, or there can be. There's the potential for that. All right, so that was a that was a big one. We could work on just that and probably be very busy. And then sixth, and just as important as every other component of this system of care objective, is the promotion of cultural and linguistic competence in our service delivery system. So we will seek funding to support. This is a scheme that several agencies have come together to, or several entities have come together to support. So we're kind of getting behind the idea of creating regional communities of practice centered on improving cultural and linguistic competence in the delivery of disability-related home and community-based services. We, the council, have been part of a statewide community of practice that has been looking for the last 5 years with grant support at how to create a system that is more responsive to the cultures that are much more diverse now in Vermont than they ever have been. There's always been diversity, but I mean, it's even more so now. So we are now thinking that that needs to be replicated or copied at the regional level. And there may be a possibility of funding something like that. We think that those regional communities of practice will focus mostly on training care managers, case managers, frontline staff on how to do a better job in terms of being culturally and linguistically competent. And we will continue to provide technical assistance to those regional communities of practice. The result of that, the outcome will be that providers receive training in cultural and linguistic competence, and agencies reach out to diverse communities. I believe that concludes the activities for this system of care, but we now need to look at the outputs, which is also quite an extensive list. There will be created extensive public comment, plain language explanations about the new payment model that developmental services is creating, a council position paper regarding paying parents with Medicaid, home and community-based service funds. We hope that cost-based budgeting will be initiated as the norm in developmental services, and that cost-based budgeting will support reasonable and fair rates for the programs that the designated and specialized service agencies deliver. Right now, the budgeting is not strictly based on a careful review of cost. We hope that to see created or create revised and or new funding priorities in the Developmental Disability Services System of Care Plan. We want information about the SIS-A to be in plain language, and other materials are created to prepare self-advocates to participate in their supports intensity scale interview. Right now, people don't really know what they're walking into, and that is a very anxiety-provoking situation for self-advocates. We believe we can help reduce that anxiety by ensuring that plain language explanations and even some sample questions are given to people in advance so they know what they're walking into. All right, and we have a second page of things we hope will be created: proposals for new housing models, proposals for crisis prevention and wellness support, possible seed grants for wellness projects. That's an overlap with something that was written earlier in the plan. Proposal for an ombudsman office for developmental services, an advisory group for the ombudsperson for developmental services. So we believe that in the spirit of nothing about us without us, that important function should have some accountability to recipients of service and their families. And then finally, at least 5 regional communities of practice promoting cultural and linguistic competence. That is quite a long list of things that we hope to come from this one objective. And we are now on our last objective, workforce development. As you know, we are facing a terrible workforce crisis in direct care. It's It's very difficult to hire people, and so individuals with developmental disabilities are not getting all the services they've been found to need. This objective says the council will advocate for the professionalization and stabilization of the direct care workforce. In other words, people, it is a field recognized for its important value that it brings to people's lives. It will be paid fairly, and there will be less turnover, so it will be a stable or consistent workforce. We are going to do some advocacy around training. We will advocate that the state strengthen training requirements for direct care workers, including home providers, and that the state budgets support that training, with the result that all direct care workers receive both basic core training and advanced specialized training, including training by beneficiaries of home and community-based services. Again, in the spirit of nothing about us without us, self-advocates should be part of delivering that training. We want to promote professional recognition of direct support workers. So we will co-sponsor Direct Support Professional Recognition Day each year, and we will create a short video promoting careers in direct care. The outcome will be that direct care workers are recognized for the challenging work that they do and have a clear path toward advancement. And then around equitable pay, we will continue to monitor the Biden agenda, which is called the Build Back Better agenda, since it includes a substantial amount of money for improving home and community-based services, and in particular for paying the people who work in that field better. And we will advocate annually that Vermont's state budget adequately compensate direct care workers. Those rate increases need to, insofar as there are rate increases for the designated and specialized service agencies, we believe that those rate increases should translate into better wages and not go to more overhead or more administrative costs. The outcome of that will be that direct care workers receive a livable wage that recognizes the value and complexity of their job. And the outputs that we hope to create by doing these particular activities are that there are rigorous training standards for direct support professionals and other frontline workers, that there is adequate funding for wages, benefits, and training. There are promotional materials for Direct Support Professional Day and photos from the day. There will be materials such as storyboards and video footage that will contribute to a final video project promoting direct support work. And that then the video itself that promotes direct support as a rewarding field. So those are some of the things that we hope to have created by working on this objective. We are at the final slide for systems change. And so I will review overall how this goal area stacks up in terms of the labels and requirements that the Administration for Community Living has. So depending on whatever issues might arise, remember in that second objective that was kind of a catch-all, whatever happened in the legislature that we suddenly needed to jump on, depending on that, all 8 areas of emphasis could be covered. So healthcare and health, employment, recreation, housing, transportation, it could be an issue of quality assurance, education, early intervention, or formal and informal supports. It could be anything. And of course, the system of care plan objective and the workforce development objective are tightly tied to formal and informal supports, quality assurance, and housing. This goal area does meet the Act's requirement for partnering with DD network organizations, both with Vermont Legal Aid, which houses the Disability Law Project, and with Disability Rights Vermont, our protection and advocacy organization, and with our University Center for Excellence on Disability and Community Inclusion, which is the Center for, which is the CDCI, at the University of Vermont. And then finally, the question is, how many strategies have we employed? And I believe at least 7 of the 11 strategies that are named by the Administration for Community Living are put to work in this particular goal area. So that is probably the most of any goal area: outreach, technical assistance, eliminating barriers, informing policymakers. That one has not appeared elsewhere. Coordination with other councils, systems design and redesign. That has to do with objective 4.3, system of care, and support and educate communities. That's our public awareness campaign. So this concludes the work plan and concludes this section of the video presentation. There's one last short video which reviews why we believe this is a strong work plan, and we hope that you'll just take a few minutes to listen to that final piece. And with that, I will stop sharing and turn off the video. Thank you so much.